Over the years, the main menus from Halo have set the vibes, the aesthetics, and the experiences you will have in the games. But some main menus are definitely way better than other main menus. So we decided to take a closer look at every single main menu from all of Halo history, and we even found some of the more obscure ones, and put them into a tier list to see how they stack up against each other. And this did get really interesting. So let's go ahead and take a closer look. Also, real quick, we did this on stream at twitch.tv/RocketSloth. If you ever want to join us hanging out while we're doing things like this, it can be a lot of fun. But before we get into the meat of this video, we want to give a huge thanks to Opera GX for sponsoring today's video. If you're like us and you play any kind of FPS game like Halo Infinite or maybe a Halo MCC on your PC, oftentimes you may have a YouTube video or something else playing in the background while gaming. Maybe even this video right now. A lot of conventional browsers actually end up using quite a bit of resources and decrease your game's performance. But Opera GX is optimized for gaming and maximizing performance on your PC. They have features like GX Control that let you limit the CPU or RAM usage so you can just keep everything open in the background while playing your games, and their network limiter makes sure you don't start lagging in game and that there's nothing using up unnecessary bandwidth. Plus, Opera GX has a sidebar that has integrated social apps like Discord or Twitch so you can easily chat and browse these services while getting notifications at the same time, and if you're looking for some extra goodies, there's also the GX Corner that keeps you in the loop on free games, the best deals, upcoming game releases, and other breaking news. One of our favorite features is the anti-flashbang mode. Turning on this setting forces dark pages so you don't get flashbanged by white bright websites anymore, and also besides all that, there's a mobile version of Opera GX that seamlessly syncs all your settings, browsing history, etc. between your PC and your phone. Here's the best part. Opera GX is completely free for you to try like right now. Just use the link in the description down below. We genuinely recommend this. Go test it for yourself and let us know what you think even, and we promise you won't be disappointed. So starting things off, we had to go all the way back to Halo Combat Evolved and take a look at that original main menu. Now this one, of course, was a little bit nostalgic just because of the vibe, the classic Halo theme playing, and of course in the background of the main menu, we get to see the really cool 3D in-game engine render of the Halo ring, and scrolling through some of the menus was basic, but it got the job done back in the day. Now, knowing what's coming up, we know that this menu maybe isn't the most revolutionary menu, but it got the job done back in the day. It was a great introduction to Halo for a lot of people, so we think that it's fair to put this one right in the middle in B tier. It gets the job done, and it's still cool and on the pleasant side, so we feel good about putting it here. But oh boy, when it came to Halo 2, things would be changed forever. Halo 2 is just easily one of the first menus that I think of when I think about Halo menus and the fact that they're really cool. For instance, Halo 2 just had this really clean, sleek feeling, but still had a lot of the atmospheric sound vibes that the first menu had in Halo 1, tied together with even more usage of the Halo 2 soundtrack. When you boot up the game, you're greeted to some cool guitar riffs, and then when you get to the menu, it's a little bit more relaxed, but still kind of brings you in with the really cool vibes. Once again, Halo 2 did the whole 3D rendering for the background, except this time put a cool blue filter over it, something that would be the screen that so many players would spend time on playing this game. And I think that tied to the fact that the menus were so easy to navigate, Halo 2 probably contributed to the standard lobby leaderboard that we see nowadays in a lot of multiplayer games. Halo 2 just had it down very simply, easy to navigate with a controller, and easy to set up things like your own private matches. To this day, I think Halo 2 is deserving of the highest ranking that we can give any of the menus, so we're gonna go ahead and put it up at S tier. Now, that doesn't rule out the possibility that other menus down the road could capture the same essence that Halo 2 had, but definitely the bar had been set with Halo 2, and living up to it would be something really challenging. By the time Halo 3 came around, I think for the most part, Bungie knew that their menu system in Halo 2 had become so iconic back in the Halo 2 era, and they obviously wanted to build off of that, but also do something new at the same time. And Halo 3's menu does a pretty good job. We get some new renders in the background, we get the cool Halo soundtrack, and overall Halo 3 was also really simple to navigate, but at the same time Halo 3 maybe didn't push the boundaries in doing something overly cool, and for the most part just played into what Halo 2 did and tried to evolve or rearrange some features here and there. I think it's really good overall, and I don't really have any massive complaints about it, so we're gonna go ahead and put this one in A tier. It's just slightly less atmospheric than Halo 2's, so that's the only reason it's just one tiered lower, and I'm not trying to overly weigh in my own nostalgia to weight this ranking because I spent so much time with Halo 3 back in the day, but I do feel good about this one being A tier. I do think it is deserving of where it's at. Halo Wars was a really interesting one because we couldn't even remember what the menu looked like back in the day, and it wasn't until we looked back into it to start to get a feel for what the menu system was like. And it is interesting. Halo Wars, as well as the re-release of Halo Wars, have a menu system that pretty much is very similar to that of Halo 3's, but obviously that was intentional. They wanted to capture the same aesthetic that Halo 3 had to kind of keep the brand in line with each other, and for the most part it works out really well here. They kind of took the same blue aesthetic, but they replaced the cutscenes and made it its own, and of course the Halo Wars soundtrack was really good despite not necessarily borrowing from the same Halo themes. So since this game managed to kind of capture the same concepts and themes from Halo 3 while also making it unique, I think it's deserving of going in A tier as well. Halo 3 ODST. Now this one's interesting because it is a spin-off game, so they obviously wanted to make a different approach when kind of theming this menu. ODST is known for being a much darker toned Halo game, and the main menu does a really good job at reflecting that. Now for the most part it's just the same menu from Halo 3, though there are a couple of little improvements, like you can see your ODST character rendered in the lobby, which is really nice, and of course the Halo soundtrack is replaced with music from ODST, which is obviously very atmospheric. I think if they would have just straight up copy and pasted the Halo 3 menu, it would have been down a point for lacking originality, but I feel like they made just enough changes from the original Halo 3 menu, just making ODST really have its own identity when it came to the menu, that this menu is also one of the better menus in Halo history. So we're gonna put this one also right next to Halo 3 up in A tier. Okay, now we're going on to Halo 3 Mythic. This is the multiplayer disc that came alongside Halo 3 ODST that would give you access to all of Halo 3's multiplayer and all of the DLC maps, and this one right here is really cool. I really, first of all, appreciate the aesthetic that went into the new background. They just picked different visuals to use, and I feel like the blue just looks a little bit deeper, almost reminiscent of Halo 2, but it makes it kind of have that cool vibe once again that Halo 2 had. Now for the most part, this is very similar obviously to Halo 3's menu, though I do have to say the big difference is the soundtrack that they chose for Halo 3 Mythic is just a larger sampling of the Halo 3 soundtrack, and it just has more variety. There's some really upbeat music selected in the Halo 3 Mythic disc for when you're in the menus, and it just made the vibe of chilling out with your friends in an Xbox party while you have this on in the background something that I remember being really cool. Since Halo 3's menu was already so good, Halo 3 Mythic is just taking the same concept and making it better because of the larger soundtrack selection. That's what we were looking for in Halo 3, I think, and I think because of that, this one is deserving of S tier. Okay, I'll be honest, when it comes to Halo Reach, I don't know why Halo Reach never really resonated with me the same way that Halo 2 and Halo 3 did, and maybe it's because I have just stronger feelings of nostalgia for those older ones, but I wanted to look at Halo Reach objectively here and try not to jeopardize our legitimacy for our opinions on a tier list. I know it sounds weird, but when Luke and I were talking about Halo Reach, there really isn't any reason that this game's menu shouldn't be considered in the top echelon of menus. So it automatically was already looking at A or S tier just because of the fact that the visuals were so impressive in how they handled the menus. The menu system was borrowed from how Halo 3 was, but cleaned up a lot to make it feel like a fresh new experience, and the fact that it was in a way kind of interactive with the fact that when you're playing through campaign, depending on what level you're on, your menu could change, which was really cool. On the multiplayer side of things, the way you could just scroll through and see your Spartan or someone else's Spartan was also a really cool touch, and just the user interface overall in Halo Reach was great. So even though I am a bigger fan of the Halo 2 and 3 blue blue aesthetic, and I felt like the vibes on those were really just amazing and unique. Halo Reach is a spin-off, and we have to consider that it's going to go in its own art style no matter what. There's no reason that Halo Reach shouldn't be ranked up at S tier, so that's where we put it. When it comes to Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary, for the most part, they did a pretty good job at capturing the feel from the original Halo Combat Evolved menu. That became clear. However, there were some really interesting improvements that 343 Industries made over the original menu system to just kind of help the flow of everything, while also keeping it somewhat stylistically in line with what the main Master Chief Halo games had in the past. And while for me it was more give or take whether or not they added these little refinements and little additions to things like co-op lobbies, Luke pointed out that it was a really big deal from his perspective. So while I would have maybe kind of felt like this could go in the same category, I do understand the points of it being refined and just a better presentation overall, and giving it the bump up into A tier, as it is a very clean menu. And I do think it's important to separate the fact that while I might not necessarily agree with the anniversary graphics or like them, this tier list is judging the games purely off of the menus alone, and the menu itself is pretty cool. It can go in A tier. But then on the flip side, we get the Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary multiplayer experience, which was built off of Halo Reach, which essentially is just Halo Reach, but not quite Halo Reach. We get a different background that kind of looks like Forge World, which is weird because you couldn't play Forge World in Combat Evolved Anniversary unless you had Halo Reach and you just downloaded the DLC pack. This is one of the examples where I feel like, since it just reused Halo Reach, it's a good menu, but since it lacks any real creativity or anything that kind of gave it a vibe of being a Combat Evolved celebration, it just lacks that inspiration that made Reach special. It's not a bad menu by any means, and it just kind of gets the job done, so we put it down in B tier because we feel like that's where a lot of the it passes type of menus go, even if they're just slightly inspired. It's not a bad menu, but I would have liked to maybe see them take it a step further with what type of appreciation towards the series they chose to put into this menu. Halo 4 is interesting. At first glance, it works pretty well. It gets the job done. It's very similar to what we would see in Halo Reach. It kind of brings back that blue aesthetic, but it's different at the same time, as we have all this floating debris in the background, which I don't necessarily mind. At first glance, the menu itself isn't that bad. It's not necessarily Halo 3 level good, but it's definitely not the most atrocious thing that we've ever seen. The problem comes when you start to navigate through the menus and you start to see how clunky a lot of the menu system works. The way that they reworked the multiplayer matchmaking thing, a lot of the options and settings, it just feels like they were reworking things for the sake of reworking things instead of just going with what had already worked in previous Halo titles. But since the main part of the menu is mostly competent, we feel pretty good about Halo 4 sitting down here in C tier. When it came time for 2013, nobody knew what Halo game we would get. We ended up getting Halo Spartan Assault for Windows phones, and later it would see releases elsewhere, and oh boy, this one is literally the worst. The menu is just the most uninspired, boring menu that I think I've ever seen in Halo, and also it could maybe even be up there with some menus that I've seen in video games in general. It literally looks like a very low budget phone game, despite the fact that this was a big brand iteration. And in general, I feel like phone games have better menus than even this. This just feels like two still images next to each other. Yeah, I was pretty disappointed in this one, and I think when we were looking at this on stream, everyone unanimously agreed that this was the worst menu we had looked at so far. So we think this one easily deserves to go down there in F tier. And while we're at it, we will just count the follow-up one as well, since they did another mobile game with Halo Spartan Strike. So let's take a look. Maybe they learned from their mistakes. Nope, they ended up using the exact same setup that they had from the previous one and just changed the picture and the coloring and called it a day. Still pretty bad. Maybe it's slightly better than the last one, but still F tier. Halo the Master Chief Collection. Now, there was a lot wrong with the MCC when that first came out, and the matchmaking didn't work, the UI was really buggy, but we're going to be judging MCC in two parts here. We're going to look at what it was day one and what it is now. And honestly, even way back when MCC first launched, despite the fact that I feel like they could have done more interactive things and they could have tried to make it have this more atmospheric energy to it, it got the job done, and there was some cool creative decisions made to kind of change out the background based on what game you're looking at, and the way that a lot of the things are presented are in an okay way. They definitely got better with things over time, but the original menu from day one itself was, well, passable. It wasn't ever in the line where it was just a bad menu and there was nothing redeemable about it and then it worked. There's a couple of things that we liked along the way, and it got the job mostly done. It wasn't too confusing, so we think that it can go in B tier. But mind you, this is going in B tier under the pretense that we're ignoring things like the menus not working, and we're ignoring things like custom games not being properly functioning in the early days. We're just going off of the aesthetic, and I think with that, it can go into B tier. Though with the big revisions that they would make with MCC over the years, especially when it was getting ramped up to come to PC, the fact that you can customize your menu experience is really cool. And it's awesome that you can actually pick and choose what your backgrounds are nowadays in the settings, something we didn't even realize was a thing until recently. So you can just throw up the Christmas background if that's the one you like the best whenever you want, even if it's July, like Luke does. I mean, we've always said that Halo is a Christmas franchise and you should be able to celebrate as such. I think the revisions definitely warrant a bump in the score, so the revised version of MCC will go up to A tier. While we're at it, Halo 5 Guardians Beta came out shortly after MCC's release, and the menu definitely wasn't outstanding, but it wasn't really the worst thing either. It was kind of simple. We have, you know, Master Chief standing around a table, and it really feels a lot like Halo 4's menu, but it was competent, just not necessarily something that was like, wow, this menu really just is the vibe. And because of that, we put it down in C tier. But when Halo 5 Guardians officially released and they decided to make something new or bring something new to the table, I feel like they took a step back and ended up making something worse. This shot of infinity is just basic. The music's okay, which is the one thing kind of redeeming it, but then the rest of the menus felt clunkier and more confusing than before. The way that the whole campaign menu is set up is kind of a mess. We don't really even get to see what mission we're going into through like a thumbnail like we could in every other Halo game. And just in general, I've not been a fan of how Halo 5 Guardians menu looks. It's better than Spartan Strike and Assault, but not by that much. So we decided to put this one down in D tier. Okay, there's a few other smaller Halo related things that we need to throw in this tier list as well. For instance, there was Halo Online, which released in Russia only, and it never even fully came out of beta before it was canceled. But oh boy, is this menu confusing to look at. This was actually originally an F tier menu, and we were talking about it on Twitch because we did this one before we had gotten to the mobile games. And in comparison, yeah, the mobile games are really that bad. So it ended up going up to D tier just so that the mobile games could sit on this lower level of hell. But this one almost feels like a really crappy pay-to-win microtransaction mobile game menu, except it's a full release PC game. It's not a complete disaster. There's some cool elements like the ships flying in the background, but I think we would be doing a disservice to things like Halo 4's main menu if we put this one side by side with it. So it's fairly going to go in D tier next to Halo 5. Then we have Fireteam Raven, which released, which is one of the most basic looking menus that we've seen. It pretty much reuses Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary's menu and just has some boxes on there like story mode and mission select where you can just pick the levels. There's nothing revolutionary, but CEA did have a good looking main menu. So because the fact that they took a good menu at least and copy and pasted it but didn't really add any originality, I think it's fair to bump it down a grade or two, and we felt pretty okay with it going into C tier. Then there's Halo Recruit. It's a Halo VR game that's really like a VR demo. We don't even know why this thing exists, but we were looking at the menu of it just to see what it's like, and there barely is a menu. We get this screen and it just says pull trigger. That's all we get, and a bunch of flashes on the screen. We tried to pull it up on stream just to see what it would look like, and it kept crashing on Luke's computer every time we tried. So we just had to look at a video archive of it, and it was pretty underwhelming. So it's going down there in F tier with our good old mobile games. Halo Wars 2. It's pretty good. It's not necessarily the most clean and amazing main menu in the entire Halo franchise, days, but it's an example of another menu that has some cool elements and for the most part gets the job done. I don't think it's the most groundbreaking. I noticed that a lot of the models kind of look like action figures, which is kind of weird, but there's nothing outright bad about this menu either. And since it does have a little bit of a vibe, we felt pretty good putting this in B tier, and that's where it stayed. Now, we weren't fully sure if we were going to include this next one on the list, but we ended up having to acknowledge it because it takes us back to the good old Halo 3 days, which is the main menu for Halo Online, the El Dorito fan version of the game. Now, this got shut down a couple of days after it released, though the servers did stay active for several months after the game did see its limited release, and it was really, really cool. The main menu is essentially the same menu from Halo 3, though instead they went with a flyby of the map Valhalla, which some of you eagle-eyed Halo fans may remember way back in Halo 3's beta days when they did their open beta. That's essentially where the main menu comes from. Besides the fact that the energy and vibe of this main menu reminds us of the Halo 3 Mythic menu, the fact that they also made some big improvements from Halo 3, like the way that your Spartan customization works, and a couple other little things here and there, really brought Halo Online a step up. And considering that this is a fan build based off of that atrocious Halo Online Russia menu that we had before, is just this huge jump in quality comparatively. And honestly, I feel like 343 could learn something about these menus that we're putting up in S tier. If Halo moving forward always had these type of menus that had this atmosphere, or even anything in the A tier, don't get me wrong, it's not the most important thing that Halo needs, but I think it would kind of reinvigorate this aesthetic mix of Halo that has become nostalgic for so many Halo players. So we ended up going ahead and feeling like this one was deserving of sitting up there in S tier as well. Now, before we can jump right into Halo Infinite, there was a few other little ones that are worth noting here. There was the Halo 2 multiplayer map pack, which essentially was a separate disc that was sold where you could install the Halo 2 multiplayer map pack, and that was cool that they released that physically for people who didn't have the best internet connections. But let's be real, the menu really isn't all that impressive. It kind of took inspiration from the Halo 2 menu, but it didn't necessarily really recreate it. It definitely feels more like a DVD menu that was thrown together real quick. Not that this is like a statement on what Halo was like back in the day, but if we're just going off of designs for Halo menus, this one is D tier. Also, over the years, Halo Waypoint had some pretty interesting menus as well. And Halo Waypoint, which was originally the Xbox 360 app where you could check your stats and watch videos on Halo and things that were coming up in the future, was really cool because this was a time before Xbox 360 had YouTube and before you had an internet browser on your phone or on your Xbox that you could go look at your stats at. It was a really cool tool. And over the years, the main menu evolved based off of whatever Halo game was out. So we had a Halo 3 ODST version, a Halo Reach version, and a Halo 4 version. And all these menus were kind of cool. They're pretty competent, and even though they changed the way that Waypoint looked multiple times, every time they did it, there was some redeemable qualities about them, and never was the navigation in this overtly confusing. For instance, I would say that the ODST one is really good. The Reach one was also pretty good, and the Halo 4 one was maybe a little more confusing. I think it's just fair to put all three of them together since it's like one thing in B tier. And for the most part, Luke and I felt pretty good about that. We have one last Halo game to look at, and it was Halo Infinite. And this one was a little interesting because Luke and I kind of wanted to approach this one with the scope of us having the rest of the tier list done and really try to decide, like, is it better than this one? Is it worse than this other one? When it comes to Halo Infinite's menu, we definitely feel like it's a competent menu for the most part, once again avoiding like looking into bugs and things like that. Stylistically, it gets the job done. And there are some really cool things they did as well, like having your Spartan on the menu, the campaign changing from what the multiplayer side looks like. Those are good things. And also the soundtrack for Halo Infinite is really good, and the menu music is quite enjoyable. Though things like the loading screens are maybe a little repetitive, we didn't want to fault it too much on those type of things. And ultimately, while I don't feel like it's the top echelon of menus, I don't feel like it compares fairly to any of the S tier menus. And also, I don't think we can put this side by side with Halo 3 or Halo 3 ODST and be like, yeah, this menu is about the same as that. For those reasons, I think it fits fairly in the B tier, even though it's probably slightly better than the rest of the the menus that are in the B tier, maybe tied with Halo Wars 2. So it's going in B tier, but I think we would have both agreed that it's kind of sitting slightly higher in the B tier, but still B tier for those reasons. Okay, so that's our tier list. Which one do you disagree with the most? And which one do you think is about the same for you guys? Did you agree with some of our takes at least? You're entitled to your own opinion, so you can leave it in the comments down below and tell us why we're wrong. The whole time we were doing this, someone was screaming that Halo 4 needed to be S tier in our chat. We just ignored him. But if that's your opinion, let us know in the comments, and it'll be interesting to see what other people think. Also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe and notifications on for more Halo videos like this. We gotta give a huge shout out to our Patreon supporters. It's been crazy that we've even gotten this much support on Patreon. If you enjoy our content and you feel like at any point we've provided some level of value of content and you have an extra $1 or $2 that you want to throw our way on Patreon, it surprisingly does go a long way for us. So maybe you could check that out. But otherwise, that's it for today. We'll see you all next time with a brand new video.